The rain struck the penthouse windows like gunfire, but the real violence was in his voice. "Get out!" Carlo roared, hurling her suitcase onto the cold marble floor. He was the ruthless king of the Chicago underworld, and by midnight he was tossing his own wife into the unforgiving streets. The digital clock on the bedside table read 11:45. Outside, a brutal Midwestern thunderstorm was tearing across Lake Michigan, battering the glass walls of the Barbieri penthouse. Inside, the atmosphere was even more volatile. Bianca Ferraro stood in the center of the vast, minimalist bedroom, pulling her silk robe tighter around her full, curved figure. She had always been a woman of substance, possessing a lush, plus-sized silhouette that defied the typical razor-thin aesthetic of mafia wives. The other bosses in the syndicate whispered about her behind closed doors, underestimating her, assuming she was merely a soft, docile plaything for the Don. But Carlo Barbieri had never treated her that way. To him, her body was a temple, and her mind was a steel trap. He was a man who crushed his enemies without a second thought, yet he kissed the ground she walked on. He was fiercely, dangerously obsessed with her, or at least he had been until 10 minutes ago. "Get out," Carlo repeated, his voice dropping to a lethal, gravelly register. "I want you out of this house before the clock strikes 12, Bianca." He stood by the doorway, a towering, broad-shouldered silhouette against the dim hallway lighting. His custom Italian suit was discarded, his crisp white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the dark ink of the syndicate tattoos on his chest. His eyes, usually warm like melted dark chocolate when they looked at her, were completely dead. They were the eyes of the monster the rest of the world saw. The eyes of a killer. "Carlo, please," Bianca said, keeping her voice steady, despite the jagged pain ripping through her chest. "What is happening? You come home covered in rain and blood, and you tell me to pack?" "What did I do?" "You became a liability," he spat, stepping forward to grab the expensive leather suitcase off the bed. He zipped it shut with violent force. "I am running an empire, Bianca. The Barbieri family is expanding. I do not have time to play house with a woman who needs constant protection. I am tired of looking at you. I am tired of this marriage. It is over." The words felt like a physical blow. Bianca staggered back a half step, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. She stared at him, searching for the man who, just yesterday, had spent an hour tracing the curves of her hips, whispering that he would burn the city to ashes before letting anyone touch her. "You are lying," she said, lifting her chin. Her hidden strength had always been her composure. She possessed an analytical, brilliant mind, one that secretly laundered the Barbieri money through complex offshore shell corporations without anyone in the family ever knowing she was the architect. "I know you, Carlo. Something is wrong. Talk to me." "I am done talking," he roared. He grabbed her suitcase and hurled it out the bedroom door. It crashed against the marble floor of the corridor, bursting open and spilling her clothes everywhere. "I want you out. If you are not in the elevator by midnight, I will have my men drag you out by your hair." Bianca flinched. The raw cruelty in his tone was absolute. She looked at his hands and noticed that his knuckles were white. His fists were clenched so tightly that his forearms were trembling. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of pure agony passed behind his cold eyes, but he quickly masked it with a sneer. "Do you need me to call the guards to escort you out, you pathetic woman?" Carlo sneered, stepping closer, his imposing frame meant to intimidate her. Tears pricked Bianca's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. If he wanted to play the heartless bastard, She would not give him the satisfaction of breaking down. She drew her shoulders back, her plush figure radiating a quiet, formidable dignity. "Do not bother," she said quietly, her voice laced with ice. "I can find the door myself." She walked past him, forcing herself not to look back. She moved down the long corridor, kneeling quickly to shove her scattered clothes back into the leather bag. Every movement felt like moving through wet cement. Her heart was shattering into a million jagged pieces, but her survival instinct was kicking in. As she reached the private elevator at the end of the foyer, she pushed the call button. The steel doors slid open immediately. She stepped inside with her heavy bag. Just before the doors closed, she looked up. Carlo was standing at the far end of the hall. The sneer was gone. He looked completely devastated, staring at her as if she were oxygen and he was suffocating. His lips moved slightly, forming a silent word just as the steel doors clamped shut, cutting him off from her sight. "I am sorry." The elevator began its rapid descent down the 60 floors of the residential tower. Bianca leaned against the cold metal wall, gasping for air as the tears finally spilled over her cheeks. He had thrown her out. In the middle of the night, during a storm, he had discarded her like trash. But her analytical mind was already spinning. Why now? Why so suddenly? Why were his hands shaking? The digital floor indicator flashed down to the basement parking garage. Ding! The doors opened to the dimly lit concrete expanse. A black SUV was waiting, the engine idling quietly. Standing beside it was Frank, Carlo's most trusted driver and enforcer. Frank looked nervous. He was checking his watch and scanning the shadows of the garage, his hand resting on the bulge under his jacket. "Boss said I am taking you to the private airstrip," Frank said gruffly, opening the rear door for her. "We have a jet waiting. You are going to Switzerland." "Switzerland?" Bianca stopped in her tracks. "Carlo said he was throwing me out. Why would he arrange a jet?" "Get in the car, Mrs. Barbieri," Frank urged, panic bleeding into his tone. "Please, we do not have time." "He said I have to get you out of the city by midnight." Bianca climbed into the back seat, pulling her suitcase in with her. Frank slammed the door and rushed to the driver's seat, throwing the massive vehicle into gear and speeding out of the parking garage into the torrential downpour. As they drove through the slick, empty streets of downtown Chicago, the puzzle pieces began to snap together in Bianca's mind. Carlo had come home smelling of blood. He had forced a fight. He had pushed her away with unbearable cruelty, knowing it was the only way she would leave without arguing. He was clearing the board, because a war had come to their doorstep. The windshield wipers of the SUV slapped frantically against the heavy rain. Bianca wiped the condensation from the window, looking out at the blurry neon lights of the city. Her sorrow was rapidly melting into a cold, terrifying dread. "Frank," she called out from the back seat. "Who is hitting us tonight?" Frank gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I do not know what you are talking about, ma'am. Boss's orders are just to get you on that plane." "Do not lie to me," Bianca commanded, her voice ringing with sudden authority. She was no fragile trophy wife. She knew the syndicate's operations better than some of the capos. "If Carlo sent me away, it means the penthouse is no longer safe. It means the perimeter is breached." "Who is it?" Frank swallowed hard, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "Trent Falcone." The name sent a chill straight down Bianca's spine. Trent Falcone was the ruthless, bloodthirsty head of the New York syndicate. For months, Trent had been trying to establish a foothold in Chicago, smuggling weapons and narcotics through the ports that Carlo controlled. Carlo had pushed back hard, shutting down Trent's operations. The tension between the two families had been a powder keg waiting for a match. "Trent is in Chicago," Bianca asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. Frank nodded grimly. He flew in tonight. Half our capos went silent an hour ago. We think they flipped to Falcone's side. Boss knew they were coming for the tower. He knew if you were there, Trent would use you to break him. He made himself the bait so you could get out. Bianca felt a sudden, violent surge of nausea. Carlo had thrown her out, not because he hated her, but because he was setting a final stand. He intended to die in that penthouse, taking as many of Falcone's men with him as possible, ensuring she was far away and safe. "Turn the car around," Bianca ordered. "I cannot do that, Mum," Frank replied. "My life is forfeit if I do not put you on that jet." "I said turn it around," Bianca yelled, leaning forward. Before Frank could respond, the dark street ahead was suddenly illuminated by blinding high beams. A heavy armored truck pulled out from an alleyway, blocking the entire intersection. "Hold on!" Frank shouted, slamming on the brakes and spinning the steering wheel. The heavy SUV skidded on the wet asphalt, hydroplaning toward the concrete barrier of an underpass. Just as they came to a halt, a second vehicle, a sleek black sedan, boxed them in from behind. They were trapped beneath the flickering amber lights of the bridge. The ambush was precise, military-like. This was not a random hit. It was Trent Falcone's men. "Stay down," Frank ordered, drawing his weapon. The sound of automatic gunfire shattered the roar of the rain. The reinforced glass of the SUV cracked and spiderwebbed as heavy-caliber bullets slammed into it. Frank fired back through his window, dropping one of the shadowy figures approaching from the front. But there were too many. A sudden spray of bullets pierced the driver's side door, and Frank slumped over the steering wheel, blood blooming across his chest. "Frank!" Bianca screamed, reaching forward, but he was gone. The gunfire stopped. The heavy silence that followed was broken only by the sound of boots splashing on the wet pavement. They were closing in. They wanted to take her alive. Trent Falcone would know that holding the beloved wife of Carlo Barbieri was the ultimate leverage. Fear threatened to paralyze her, but Bianca forced herself to breathe. She was plus-sized, but she was not slow, and she was certainly not helpless. Growing up on the tough side of the city before meeting Carlo, she knew how to survive in the dark. She slipped off her heavy coat to allow herself free movement. She reached over the center console, keeping her head down, and pried Frank's spare weapon from his shoulder holster. Her hands were shaking, but she checked the safety and the clip, just as Carlo had taught her on the firing range. She opened the rear passenger door on the side facing the concrete pillar of the underpass. It was tight, but she squeezed her soft, curved frame through the gap, dropping onto the wet asphalt and rolling into the pitch-black shadow of the pillar. She heard a man laughing cruelly as the passenger doors of the SUV were yanked open from the opposite side. "Where is the fat bitch?" a harsh voice rang out. "Boss wants her breathing." "Check the back, check the trunk," another yelled. Bianca pressed her back against the cold concrete. She closed her eyes, centering her mind. They thought she was a frightened, clumsy woman. They were about to find out exactly why the most dangerous man in Chicago had married her. She peeked around the pillar. 2 armed men were searching the vehicle, their backs turned to her. A third man was standing near the front of the SUV lighting a cigarette. Bianca stepped out from the shadow. She raised the heavy pistol, gripping it with both hands. She did not hesitate. She fired 2 shots. The first took the smoking man in the chest, dropping him instantly. The deafening cracks echoed under the bridge. The other 2 men spun around in shock. Bianca used her momentum, dropping low behind the hood of the black sedan that had boxed them in. Bullets pinged against the metal above her head. She crawled swiftly around the rear bumper, her breath coming in sharp, controlled gasps. She popped up on the opposite side, flanking the hitmen. She fired 3 more times, taking down the second man. The last man panicked, firing wildly into the shadows. Bianca waited for him to empty his clip, the click, click, click of his jammed weapon serving as her cue. She stepped forward and delivered a swift, brutal strike with the butt of her gun to his temple. He collapsed to the wet pavement. The underpass fell dead silent, save for the rain. Bianca stood panting over the bodies. Her hands were covered in grease and rainwater, her silk pajamas clinging to her body. She retrieved a phone from the pocket of the man she had just knocked out. It was a burner. Her brilliant, logical mind went to work. She accessed the device, bypassing the simple passcode with a backdoor trick she used for syndicate security. She found the recent messages. They were from a number she recognized from the offshore wire traces. Trent Falcone. The last message read, "The pig is trapped at the underpass. Bring her to the Barbieri penthouse. I want Carlo to watch his wife bleed before I take his crown." Bianca felt a cold, ruthless fury ignite in her blood. Trent was at the penthouse. He was torturing her husband. She looked at the black sedan the hitmen had used to block the SUV. The engine was still running. Carlo had ordered her to leave. He had tried to sacrifice himself to save her. But Carlo Barbieri had forgotten one crucial thing. Bianca did not take orders when it came to the man she loved. She walked over to the sedan, ignoring the dead men on the ground. She climbed into the driver's seat, wiped the rain from her face, and slammed the car into reverse. She spun the steering wheel, turning the vehicle back toward the towering skyline of downtown Chicago. She was going back to the penthouse, and Trent Falcone was going to learn what happens when you try to evict a queen from her own castle. The black sedan tore through the slick, rain-washed streets of Chicago, the tires throwing up curtains of water as Bianca Ferraro pushed the engine to its limits. Her pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against her throat, but her mind was terrifyingly clear. She was no longer the soft, pampered wife being cast out into the storm. She was the architect of the Barbieri Syndicate's financial empire, a woman whose intelligence and resilience were forged in the unforgiving fires of poverty before Carlo had ever found her. She slammed on the brakes as she approached the rear alley of the Barbieri residential tower, skidding to a halt behind a row of industrial dumpsters. The main entrance would be heavily guarded by Trent Falcone's men, but Bianca knew the building better than the architects who designed it. She had overseen the security retrofitting herself. Stepping out into the freezing rain, she ignored the cold seeping through her wet silk clothes. She moved swiftly to a heavy steel utility door meant for maintenance crews. It required a biometric scan and a 12-digit passcode. Her fingers flew across the keypad in a blur, and she pressed her thumb to the scanner. The heavy deadbolts retracted with a mechanical thud. She slipped inside, the heavy door clicking shut behind her, sealing out the howl of the storm. The service corridor was dimly lit and smelled of ozone and floor wax. She bypassed the main elevators, heading straight for the private freight lift that connected directly to the penthouse's panic room. As the elevator ascended the 60 floors, Bianca checked the clip of Frank's pistol. 5 rounds left. It would have to be enough. The elevator came to a silent halt. The steel doors parted, revealing the pitch-black interior of the panic room, which sat just behind the main living area of the penthouse. Through the heavy reinforced walls, she could hear the muffled sounds of destruction, furniture being smashed, glass shattering, and then a voice that made her blood run cold. "Look at you," Trent Falcone sneered, his thick New York accent cutting through the tension in the room. "The great Carlo Barbieri, the untouchable king of Chicago. And here you are, bleeding on your own imported rug like a slaughtered pig. Bianca pressed her ear against the hidden access door that led into the main hallway. "Do what you came to do, Falcone," Carlo's voice replied. It was rough, wet with blood, but utterly devoid of fear. He sounded like a man who had already accepted his death, a man who had nothing left to lose. "Oh, I will," Trent laughed softly. "But not yet. You see, I sent a crew to intercept your little extraction run. My boys caught up with that SUV under the bridge. They are bringing your fat, pathetic wife back up here right now. I want you to watch what my men do to her before I put a bullet in your skull." A heavy, sickening thud echoed through the wall, followed by a sharp groan from Carlo. "If you touch one hair on her head," Carlo snarled, the raw, animalistic fury in his voice making the floorboards vibrate. "If you even look at her, I will crawl out of hell and tear your throat out with my teeth. She is innocent in this. She is gone. She is mine now," Trent mocked. She was always too much woman for a dead man, anyway. Bianca felt a dangerous, chilling calm wash over her. Trent Falcone had made a fatal miscalculation. He viewed her size, her curves, and her quiet demeanor as weaknesses. He assumed she was a prize to be won, a pawn to be traded. She reached into the dark alcove beside the hidden door and flipped open a discreet metal panel. Inside was a manual override switch for the penthouse's smart grid. Bianca had insisted on installing it for emergencies. She gripped the handle of the hidden door, took a deep breath, and yanked the power switch downward. Instantly, the entire penthouse plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. Shouts of confusion erupted from the living room. "What happened to the lights?" Trent barked. "Backup generators now. Spread out and cover the doors." Bianca pushed the hidden door open, slipping silently into the shadowy hallway. Her plush, curved figure, draped in dark, wet silk, allowed her to blend seamlessly into the pitch-black environment. She moved barefoot across the cold marble, her steps making absolutely no sound. She reached the edge of the sprawling living room. Lightning flashed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the grim tableau for a fraction of a second. Carlo was on his knees in the center of the room, his hands zip-tied behind his back, his face bruised and bleeding. 4 of Trent's heavily armed men were fanning out, their flashlights cutting erratic beams through the darkness. Trent stood near Carlo, a silver revolver gleaming in his hand. "Check the breaker panel in the hall," Trent ordered one of the guards. A massive enforcer lumbered toward the hallway where Bianca was hiding, the beam of his flashlight bouncing off the walls. Bianca pressed her back against the corridor wall, regulating her breathing. As the man stepped past the threshold, she reached out, grabbing his tactical vest and yanking him off balance into the dark hallway. Before he could yell, she brought the heavy butt of her pistol down hard on the base of his skull. He dropped to the floor like a stone. Bianca caught his dropped flashlight, keeping it turned off, and relieved him of his spare ammunition. "Hey!" Trent yelled from the living room. "Marco, did you find the panel?" Silence answered him. "Marco!" Trent shouted again, a note of panic creeping into his voice. Another flash of lightning tore through the sky. In that brief burst of illumination, Carlo lifted his head. His dark, bruised eyes scanned the shadows of the hallway. He could not see her, but Bianca knew he could feel her presence. A look of absolute terror and desperate hope crossed his ruined face. She had not run. She had come back for him. "Do not just stand there!" Trent yelled at his remaining 3 men. "Shoot anything that moves in that hallway!" Bianca did not wait for them to aim. She dropped to the floor just as a hail of bullets shredded the drywall where she had been standing seconds before. Crawling on her stomach, she moved out from the hallway and behind the massive, curved leather sofa in the living room. The gunfire ceased, leaving a ringing silence broken only by the thunder outside. "Find her," Trent commanded, grabbing Carlo by the collar and pressing the barrel of the revolver to his temple. "Whoever is in here, turn the lights on and drop your weapons, or Barbieri gets his brains painted on the glass." Bianca rose slowly from behind the sofa, her hands steady, the pistol gripped tightly. She reached over and clicked on the flashlight she had taken from the downed guard, shining the blinding beam directly into Trent Falcone's eyes. Trent squinted, throwing an arm up to shield his face. "Shoot her!" he screamed at his men. Bianca fired twice. The deafening cracks echoed in the massive room. Two of Trent's men dropped to the floor, their weapons clattering against the marble. The third man hesitated, blinded by the light and shocked by the sudden, lethal accuracy of the intruder. That hesitation cost him his life. Bianca fired a third time, hitting him squarely in the chest. He collapsed backward into a glass coffee table, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. "Drop the gun, Trent," Bianca commanded, her voice ringing out clear and cold in the darkness. Trent blinked rapidly, trying to adjust his vision. He peered down the beam of the flashlight, his face twisting into a mask of pure disbelief as he recognized the silhouette of the woman holding the weapon. "Bianca," Trent breathed, a hysterical laugh escaping his lips. "You? The fat little accountant took out my best men." "Let him go," Bianca said, stepping out from behind the sofa. She kept the flashlight trained on Trent's face and the pistol aimed directly at his chest. Trent tightened his grip on Carlo, hiding behind the larger man's shoulders. "You are out of your mind, sweetheart. You think you can shoot me without hitting your precious husband? Drop the gun, or I blow his head off right now." Carlo looked at her, his dark chocolate eyes filled with a chaotic storm of fury, pride, and agonizing fear. "Bianca," he rasped, coughing up a spatter of blood. "I told you to get it out." "You do not get to make my choices for me, Carlo," she replied smoothly, not taking her eyes off Trent. "You forgot who you married. I manage the books, I manage the money, and I manage the messes you leave behind. This is just another mess." Trent laughed again, cocking the hammer of his revolver. "Cute. Real cute. But this is the end of the line for the Barbieri Empire. Say goodnight, Carlo." Trent shifted his weight just a fraction of an inch to brace for the recoil. Bianca possessed a brilliant, analytical mind. She did not just see the world. She calculated it. She saw the slight shift in Trent's shoulder. She saw the angle of his arm, and she knew exactly where to put the bullet. She did not aim for his chest. She dropped her aim and fired. The bullet tore through Trent's kneecap. Trent let out a blood-curdling scream, his leg buckling instantly beneath him. The revolver fired wildly into the ceiling as he collapsed sideways, losing his grip on Carlo. In a flash of brutal, terrifying violence, Carlo moved. Despite his zip-tied hands, he lunged backward, bringing his heavy boots down viciously onto Trent's throat. The crack of cartilage was sickeningly loud. Trent gagged, dropping his weapon and clutching his ruined neck as he thrashed on the floor. Carlo rolled over, grabbed a shard of broken glass from the shattered coffee table with his bound hands, and drove it directly into the side of Trent Falcone's neck. Blood sprayed across the marble floor. Trent convulsed once, twice, and then went completely still. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the rain lashing against the windows. Bianca lowered the pistol, her hands finally beginning to shake. She walked over to the wall panel and flipped the manual override back up. The warm, ambient lighting of the penthouse flickered back on, revealing a scene of absolute carnage. She hurried over to Carlo, dropping to her knees on the bloody floor. She set the gun aside and grabbed a smaller, sharper piece of glass, carefully slicing through the thick plastic zip ties binding his wrists. As soon as his hands were free, Carlo did not check his wounds. He did not look at the dead men surrounding them. He grabbed Bianca, pulling her lush, trembling body violently against his chest. He buried his face in her wet hair, inhaling her scent as if he had been drowning and she was oxygen. "You came back," he whispered, his voice cracking with a raw emotion he never showed to the world. "You stupid, brilliant, beautiful woman. You came back. I threw you out to save you, and you drove straight back into hell." "You were trying to die without me," Bianca replied, wrapping her arms around his broad, bruised shoulders. "I do not authorize that expense, Carlo. We are a partnership." Carlo pulled back, cupping her face with his large, blood-stained hands. His dark eyes were blazing with an intense, terrifying obsession that sent a shiver straight down to her core. He looked at her, not just with love, but with profound, boundless reverence. "I am a fool," he murmured, pressing his forehead against hers. "I tried to protect you from the wolves, completely forgetting that I married a lioness." He leaned in and kissed her, a desperate, bruising kiss that tasted of blood, rain, and survival. It was a promise signed in violence. Trent Falcone was dead. The New York syndicate would scatter by morning. The city of Chicago still belonged to Carlo Barbieri, but the underworld would soon learn a new truth. The king was ruthless, but the queen was the one who truly held the power. Carlo pulled away slightly, his thumb tracing the curve of her jawline. "Tomorrow, we burn whatever is left of Falcone's crew to ashes. But tonight..." He picked her up in his arms, ignoring the pain in his ribs, cradling her full figure against his chest as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. "Tonight, my queen. You are never leaving this penthouse again." Did this gritty, high-stakes mafia romance leave you on the edge of your seat? If you loved watching Bianca prove her hidden strength and outsmart the underworld, show your support. Hit that like button, share this thrilling story with your friends, and drop a comment below, telling us your favorite moment. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss another heart-pounding tale of dark romance and revenge. See you in the next video.